And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Nanci Danison, spiritual author, pilot, retired attorney, and former private investigator who's also had near-death experiences, which we're going to learn about, and more. Nanci, thanks for joining me and welcome.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you. And you have died 3 times and you've had a shared death experience and, 6 times. Okay, my notes are wrong then. You have died 6 times and have had shared death experiences and OBEs. And during one of your NDEs, you were possibly dead for 30 minutes. Can you briefly tell us about that one?
That was the first one, which was on March 14th, 1994. And I died as a result of, my heart just stopped. I think that I went into a fatal cardiac arrhythmia as a result of anaphylactic shock. I was allergic to the local anesthetic that I was given for the procedure. And I also had very low blood sugar. And the combination of the two just took me out. That experience was the most like those that are familiar to your audience. I got out of my body. I went through some darkness. I went into the light. I started getting lots of information downloaded into my mind while I was in the light. I had a life review, but I didn't go through a tunnel. I didn't have any loved ones meet me. I didn't see anyone I knew. And I didn't see any earthly like scenery. But the rest of it was a pretty standard near-death experience. But then things started getting interesting. During my life review, I saw that Nanci's life was being played on what seemed like kind of the outside of the bubble all around me. And by that time, I had encountered my 5 most beloved eternal friends in light being form. So they were with me. One of them was inside the bubble with me. The other 4 were on the outside of the bubble. And the ones on the outside would pop into a scene in my life and live it. And they could live it either as them or they could live it as me. And they were doing that over and over, just popping into scenes of my lifetime and living them as though they were on Earth, physically living them. And as fascinating as I found that, it was more interesting to me that I started remembering hundreds and hundreds or even thousands of other lifetimes that I had lived all over the universe. And I could remember every single one of them in minute detail, every thought, every word, every deed, every dream, every hope, every sensory input, just everything, all at the same time. Hundreds of thousands of lifetimes, all at the same time. And I remembered them all. And I was astounded that I had forgotten them. How could I possibly forget all that living while I was in Nanci's life? It made no sense to me. And so I just watched them and I relived them. I relived every single one all at the same time. And if I may, I'd like to tell you some of my favorite other lifetimes that I had lived.
Well, before you go there, I want to make one comment, and that is, I think we should rename the term or reterm it to life relive, because so many near-death experiencers see it as reliving, not just reviewing.
It's also even more than reliving, because if you're what I call an expanded afterlife experiencer like I was, and even some what I call threshold afterlife experiencers who have a life review, you not only relive the lifetime you just left, but you can get inside of the other people in the scene with you and hear their thoughts, feel their emotions, observe your actions from their perspective, and feel how they responded to you. And you also, Jeff, during an expanded life review, get the answers to all your questions of why. Why did they look at me like that? Why did they do this? Why did they respond that way? Because you get to be inside them and get their perspective on you. And that helps you to understand, why they did what they did. You also get to understand why you did what you did. So one of the purposes of the life review, the way the source created it, is to help you transition out of thinking that you're a human and out of thinking the way a human thinks and back into your natural spiritual state of unconditional love. So you get to see all aspects of everyone involved in every event that you've ever participated in, because that helps you understand that your perspective wasn't the only one, and that other people's perspectives are valid, and that there's a reason why everybody acted the way they did. And that kind of takes some of the judgmentalness out of your recollection of that particular event in your life.
There's one other thing I want to note, and you are the second person out of nearly 900 that has told me that other people on the other side can also experience your past lives. And I feel it's like once you go up there, you basically upload your life into the collective, and everybody can go relive your life.
Well, while I was in the afterlife, what you're calling the collective was called the rest of us. There are only maybe 12 English words used in my whole experience, but the rest of us is what my light being friends called, what humans call God, and I now call Source. And it is, in fact, a collective as well as one. It is one phenomenon composed of zillions of what we call souls. So you and I we're not the bodies that we see in the mirror. We're the soul inside the body, and we are part of Source, literally.
I guess it's
consciousness and self-awareness.
I guess it's just hard for our brains to think of all of us being God.
It is.
Spread it into trillions of beings.
The closest I can come to an Earth-like analogy are two things. One is a novelist who creates book characters and keeps all his characters straight in in his or her mind. And they may have, dozens and dozens of book characters up there. They're all individual and they're all unique. And when they go to write a novel, they may have to look at notes every once in a while to make sure they got the characters straight, but they've got all these characters in their mind. That's the way Source is. It created all these mental characters that we call souls. Another close analogy is dreaming. When we dream, we've got mental characters in our dream, but they're all us. So no matter how many characters we see in a dream, if we're at a concert with hundreds of characters, they're all just us. They're mental projections of us. So each one of us has thousands or millions of mental characters that we see in dreams.
Have you ever seen yourself as an ET in a previous life?
Yes, I was going to tell you about some of my favorite other life experiences that I was able to remember while I was in this first expanded afterlife experience. And there were so many that I only remember a few. One thing I wanted to note was I don't recall any of the others being human lives. I do recall being a fish. I don't know on what planet, but I was some kind of a fish that loved to swim up close to the surface while a boat was going by, and when the wake was going by. And I loved to get in the bubbles of the wake and just bounce around in there. And so I would stay close to the surface and watch for the boats to come and then get up in their wake and then out of the way of the propeller. And I did that as many times as I could. And I remember feeling the sunshine, filtering down through the water and feeling the wake and the bubbles. Another lifetime, and again, I don't know where this was, but I was some kind of big cat, like a panther or a mountain lion or something like that. And I could feel walking on all fours, and I could feel this big furry belly swaying back and forth as I walked. I could feel my paws hitting the ground, and I could feel that belly swaying. And that's all I remember of that lifetime. I had a lifetime as a shuttle pilot that kind of interfered with my learning how to fly in Nanci's lifetime. But when I was a shuttle pilot, I saw myself in something shiny. It wasn't a mirror, but it was something shiny. So it's the only other lifetime where I actually saw what I looked like. And I looked sort of like the next generation. No, yeah, I was thinking it was the next generation versions of Klingons. You know, humanoid shape with forehead crest, and then big
Like
crest on my head, like horny crests. And I had orange irises in my eyes. I had eyelids that closed like this and like this. And my skin was scaly looking, but it was actually smooth to the touch, you know, kind of like the Klingons on Next Generation of Star Trek. And in that lifetime, I was a shuttle pilot. And my job was at a space station. Space stations were built for smaller spaceships. I would service the larger ones that were too big to dock at the space station. They would stay out, you know, in space. And I would fly this little shuttle out to their ship and, you know, bring passengers back to the space station or take supplies out to the ship and fly back. And I always went into a, you know, like a spaceport on the starship that was out there waiting. And so I'd come in level and just fly straight and level and then just drop down. But when I started learning how to fly an airplane in Nancy's life, I used to do it just automatically. I would try to drop that airplane down to the ground and then fly along the ground and then land. And I got in so much trouble with my flight instructors and with the FAA tester, you know, who was testing me for passing my pilot's license, because I would drop the airplane down. Instead of, you know, coming down like that, I would go like this, and it was very dangerous. But it was an instinct, you know, that had just hung over from this past lifetime. And then my favorite lifetime, Jeff, was I was a nebula. I looked like a multicolored gaseous cloud. I was spread out, you know, just like particles spread out. And I could feel me in every single particle. I could feel like I was a complete and total entity, even though I was spread out in so many different particles. And I could see the wonderful colors of the universe. And I could feel space moving through me in between my particles. And it was just the most amazing thing I've ever experienced. And I loved it.
Are you saying that you experienced these past lives during your NDE or sometime afterwards?
I relived them during my first afterlife experience.
Well, you speak about a threshold afterlife and expanded afterlife experiences. What's the difference?
I have not only experienced the afterlife 3 times and had near-death experiences in the hospital 3 times, but I've been researching NDEs for 30 years, you know, kind of like you have. I was looking for others like me who had the same kinds of experiences that I had in the afterlife and who learned the same things about the source, about the creator. I discovered in the course of 30 years of research that the reason why near-death experiences are so different is really twofold. One is because every life is unique. We're like snowflakes. No two are alike. Every life is unique, and so every afterlife or spiritual experience is unique. But more importantly, a lot of things that are called near-death experiences don't have anything to do with the afterlife. I received a download of knowings while I was in that first afterlife experience that explained the crossing over process from being incarnated to rejoining the source in the afterlife. And I was shown that the first stage is getting out of body. And a lot of NDEs are reporting events that happened while they were out of body. But that's all the farther that they got. They were never in the afterlife. They had wonderful experiences. I mean, you can have all kinds of exciting things happen just out of body. Travel, meeting light beings, receiving information. all kinds of things. The next stage is what I call the crossing over stage. And that's the part that feels like movement. That's when somebody, they may start out in a void or in blackness, but then they feel like they're moving. This is where you get the tunnel experiences. Some of my research subjects called it a portal. Some describe just going through like cave opening or just some kind of opening. It's any kind of sensation that you feel like you're moving toward something and through an enclosure of some type. It doesn't have to be a tunnel, it can be anything. And then those end at the light. Either the person goes into the light or if they don't. If they don't, then their NDE is over and they never make it into the afterlife. But sometimes there are distressing NDEs reported at the stage, where a soul gets into that blackness or that void and gets scared, and they turn around and go back to their body, which is understandable. But the next stage is what I call a threshold afterlife experience. Once you go into the light, and it doesn't have to be a light, and it doesn't have to be a white light. Some of my research subjects described multicolors, golden light, or even a dark purple velvety light, or it can be just any kind of spiritual experience that you means you're in the afterlife. And 42% of my research subjects recognized what was happening while they were going through it. I did. So they knew it was an afterlife experience. The others felt like they were home. And when you get a feeling that you're home, that's an indication that you're actually in the afterlife. But there can be lots of indications. The primary one being that huge envelope of unconditional love and unconditional acceptance. That's usually a hallmark of being in the afterlife. And then people who have what I call a threshold afterlife experience, they get into the light or the opening of the afterlife, and they may have visitations by light beings. They may receive lots of downloads of information. Some of them will see relatives or loved ones who predeceased them. Some will see, beautiful scenery that's Earth-like, like a crystal city or beautiful meadow or, Earth-like sceneries. They're actually manifestations. They don't actually exist there. Source designed this whole process to comfort the soul because it's so traumatic to leave an incarnation and return back to spiritual life. It's not just traumatic for the body, it's traumatic for the soul. And so the whole process is designed to slowly acclimate the soul to being out of human incarnation and to get them to stop thinking that they're human. The last part of what I call threshold afterlife experience is the life review. And generally what happens is the soul is either stopped by a border or a boundary or a barrier, or maybe the light being tells them, it's not your time, you've got to go back, or light being tells them you can't go any further, or there's maybe a choice given that they can stay or they can go back to the body, but they always choose to go back to their body. There's something that stops forward progress. And in fact, when Dr. Raymond Moody first defined the near-death experience, that was the culminating element that the soul is stopped from further progress. I wasn't. And I found 32 others, and they're all described in my new book called 33 Souls Who Met God. So 33 of us never hit a border or a boundary or a barrier or a light being telling us we had to go back. So we kept going. And we had these amazing adventures that only 1.7% of people reporting near-death experiencers out of the 2,000 that I have studied had. So those are the ones I'd like to tell you about.
Some people believe that once you cross that barrier, you can't come back. But it sounds like to me that you're saying you can.
Well, there's no barrier. Unless you weren't, there's not a good way to phrase this.
Unless you create it?
No, I don't. I never, in the 30 years I've been studying this, I've never determined what makes the difference. I don't know why 33 of us didn't encounter a barrier and everybody else did. There was nothing in common among the 33 of us that indicated why. And I don't think we create that barrier ourselves. I just don't know why.
Basically, I'm just doing pattern recognition, and I've seen about 5 or 6 repeating patterns through near-death experiencers. One of them is going to the black void, which you mentioned. One of them is just kind of hanging around their body until it's, fixed up enough where they can go back, whether they're in surgery or, got hit by a car or something. One of them is winding up in a waiting room, which I find fascinating. It's like, imagine being in a doctor's office or something, and you're just sitting around in a waiting room. I kind of find that the same as being at the train station, some kind of, transitory place where you might speak to a being which ultimately tells you you have to come back. Some of them are maybe kind of like what you're saying, an expanded NDE, where someone goes to a heavenly place, or commonly they go way out into the cosmos within stars and nebulas and other things. And a very, very small percentage has a hellish experience.
Okay, the black void is the very first experience when you get out of body. And my understanding, based on the knowings I received in the afterlife, is what's going on is we get habituated to seeing through human eyes. We souls can see. We don't have to have these eyes to see, but we get used to looking through them. And then when we lose them because we're out of body, it takes a few seconds to remember, oh, I can still see. And that's what causes that blackness and that void. It's just a transition point, and it doesn't last very long, but it can cause panic.
Yes.
And I would have panicked had it not been for the fact that I recognized it when I hit it.
What about the waiting room? Have you heard of that?
The waiting room is after you first get into the afterlife. It's at the very lip of the afterlife. And I was there. I was like in the light. There wasn't anything there. And so I was just all by myself, trying to figure out what had happened to me. I was doing, like the way a physician does a history and physical when you're in a doctor's office. I was checking all my vital signs, none of which were there. And I was trying to understand what had happened to me. And I kept getting all these downloads of information, but that was it. It was just me in the light and nothing going on. It wasn't until I happened to look down and I saw my body sitting in a chair in the mammography room in the cancer hospital that I realized that I might have died. So if you get to that lip of the afterlife, that just in the light, but nothing's happening, that what you call a waiting room or the train station, that's what that stage is. And you hit a barrier there, or you hit a boundary there, or somebody tells you you've got to go back. But that's actually in the afterlife. It's just that it's so barely there that nothing happens yet.
Why are some people told that they have to come back?
I don't know. Based upon the 33 members of my research group, some of them were told, because we all obviously came back, or we wouldn't have our stories to tell. Some of them were told that they had missions, like I have a mission. And we came back to work our mission. Some were, I think that's the only reason that anybody was given for why they came back. But I don't know. I've never read anything. I've never heard anything. I don't know why, other than as a general rule, I was told while I was in the afterlife that nobody dies before their time. Lots of people die. I mean, the crossing over process is automatic. If you're dying, you will go through it. You may not remember it, but you will go through it. But you'll come back if your incarnation isn't complete. if it's not your time.
Some people believe that we are forced into reincarnation. Do you think that's real?
No, I can certainly see why people think that, particularly if they're not happy with their current incarnation and they want to get out of it. I got downloads about hundreds and hundreds of things while I was in the afterlife, and one of them was about reincarnation. My understanding is that we souls were created for the purpose of incarnating. That's the only reason we exist in Source's mind. However, we are not forced to incarnate. We always choose when, where, what kind of creature or thing we're going to incarnate into, how we're going to get out of that lifetime, how quickly we're going to go back after we leave it. It's always a complete individual choice. And I learned in the afterlife that there are many stages of eternal life, and incarnation is just one stage. It's like being a teenager is one stage of human life. Incarnation is just one stage of the afterlife. And you can go into other stages that don't require incarnation, and I did, and so did some of the other 33 souls. So it's completely choice, and you can stop it whenever you want.
Just to digress to ETs real quick, I found that there's a significant number of near-death experiencers after their experience start having contact with UFOs. I feel that it somehow energetically changes a person, and either they now have the awareness of seeing them, or the UFOs or the ETs can spot them on Earth. Have you noticed any changes like that, or have you seen any UFOs?
I think it's common for a near-death experiencer to have energetic changes. That's why so many of us can't wear watches, because we interfere with the I don't know if it's the magnet or the electronics in the watch, or we have a negative impact on computer systems, or, it does change you. Dying's not good for your health. So it does change you. While I was in the afterlife, one of the many things that I did, and some of the other of the 33 souls did, was I watched the entire history and future of Earth. And I was shown that history because I was angry that nothing about the afterlife was anything like what I had been told as a Roman Catholic. And I went to Catholic school for 12 years and then 6 years of Methodist college. And I expected Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, and God with the long flowing robes. None of that is true. And I was angry and I felt betrayed. And I think Source showed me this entire history of Earth from its creation to its eventual extinction, to calm me down and show me why religions got developed and how they evolved over time and what they're going to be in the future. As part of that Earth history, I saw that there has never been an alien visitation to Earth. And before I died, I was big on UFOs. I read every book that came out about alien abductions. I was a Trekkie from the day the very first show was on the air. I watched, Battlestar Galactica. I watched every, kind of outer space or alien show that I watched. Ancient Aliens on the History Channel. I was really into it. So I think if any of that had been true, I would have seen it and I would have remembered it. I know I would have remembered it. And what I saw, now this was in 1994, what I saw was there had been no alien visitation. I would also, on my way back into Nanci's body, had this kind of random thought that part of what I was experiencing on my way back to Nanci's body was very much like what abductees describe as these, towering beings, looking down on them. What I had was my 5 light being friends who were huge light beings, looking down on me as I was whirling back into Nanci's body. And I felt them, looking at me. I felt like I was a specimen. and I could feel them looking at me. And I had this thought, I wonder if those abductees have actually had an NDE. They just don't have the context of NDE in order to put it into that kind of a spiritual context. But they do have the context for an alien abduction, so they put it into that category. I don't know. I wasn't given any information about that. But I saw no alien encounters of any type in the future. But again, this was in 1994.
Well, since you are a fan of ancient aliens, and since you saw the history of the Earth, did you see like how the pyramids were built or any of those other ancient structures?
I did, but I don't remember. See, Jeff, I wasn't coming back to Earth. I had no reason to remember. And I remember a few things about the future, but I didn't try to remember them because I wasn't coming back here. So I didn't care.
Since you learned that the afterlife is nothing that you were expecting it to be, are you saying that there is no heaven and no hell?
Heaven has a lot of different meanings on Earth. If what you're talking about is an Earth-like paradise, no, that doesn't exist. The afterlife isn't a place where you go. It's a state of existence, a level of awareness. Just like being unconscious is a state of existence and a level of awareness, but you can't go to unconscious. And being awake is a state of existence and a level of awareness. You can't go to awakeness. The afterlife is being more aware of your eternal self, more aware of source, having a broader perspective. It's a mental framework. It's not a place. And because it's an entirely mental and emotional life, there's nothing to support Earth-like physical matter. Now, there can't be any physical bodies there. There can't be any Earth-like scenery because there's nothing to support the weight. Heaven is not a planet that can support weight. But what I experienced is that heaven is being closer and closer and closer and ultimately merging into source. I don't know why, but source's energy is how source's energy feels is what humans call love. That's why NDEs, when they go into the afterlife and they talk about being flooded with this unconditional love, they're closer in the energy field than they were while they were on Earth. And that feeling is what we call love here on Earth. And even the people who've had the most extensive expanded afterlife experiences who actually merge into the core entity of source call it love. That's just what it feels like. But the best way I can describe heaven is to describe source. It is a phenomenon. It's not a being. It's not an entity. It's not a thing. It's nothing remotely like anything that we would know about here on Earth. The closest analogy might be a galaxy or cosmos or something like that. For me, it was an energy field. And I likened it to like the sun, and the sun, has a core, and then it has this gaseous corona around it. And then the sunlight goes out farther and farther and farther. That's what source is like. Source has a core personality, a core set of character traits and emotions and intelligence, and then has a corona. And the corona is that force field of love that we feel in the afterlife. And then it has like sunlight that goes out that we can feel all the way down to Earth. Whenever we feel love on Earth, that's source energy that we're feeling. So that is heaven, that being in that denser level of love, getting closer and closer to source. As for hell, no, there's no hell. And all the expanded afterlife experiencers that I found agree there's nothing like hell. And the reason for that is because human religions are based on projecting human life and what humans are like onto God and the afterlife. Humans are cruel and violent and vicious and mean and selfish and greedy. I mean, they're animals. They're wild animals. Let's face it. You have to tame, for lack of a better word, a small human in order to have them fit into society. Otherwise, they'll eat with their hands and on the floor and just run around like any kind of wild monkey would. But source isn't anything like human nature. It's energy, it's love. And what I watched, and some of the other 33 souls watched the creation of the universe. And I remember creating the universe as I was doing it as source. And I also watched it as Nanci, watching it like a movie. And I also got these like TV chyrons or little bubbles that pop up on your screen, explaining things to me as I went along. So it was like a multimedia experience. But what I and the others saw is that the universe was created inside Source's mind. It's not separate from Source. It's inside Source's mind, the same way that your dreams are inside your mind. Your dreams can't get out and walk around. Your dream characters can't. There was a Star Trek Next Generation, I think, show where one of the holodeck characters was determined to leave the holodeck and get out and walk around the spaceship. And, Captain Picard and I think it was Will kept telling him, you can't do that. You're a projection of this holodeck. And he tried and he walked a few steps out of the holodeck and disappeared. But the universe is inside Source's mind in a similar way to the characters being inside a holodeck. Source had no reason to create hell. Why would it? I mean, it created the universe out of love, out of curiosity, out of creativity, so that it could experience everything that it could imagine. And Source, being the very definition of love, would have no reason to experience hell. And nothing exists outside of Source anyway, so where would hell be? And I saw while I was there that there was no counterforce to Source. There was no evil force that existed. There's just Source. And humans have made up the idea of hell. It was a creation of the New Testament times. It didn't even exist before that.
Would you say that the purpose of religion is to tame us animals?
No, that's not what I saw in that review of Earth history of religion. What I saw is that, think of like a dog or a cat during a thunderstorm. You know how they can get really freaked out by the light and the sound? That's exactly what humans are like. They're very fragile, fearful creatures who are desperately trying to find some way to protect themselves from all the things around them that they can't control, like the weather. So early humans, in an effort to try to find some peace in their lives, made natural phenomena like the sun and the wind and the seas, made gods out of them. And then they started appeasing those gods by offering them sacrifices and offerings and things like that, because that works with a human. You can bribe a human, you can flatter a human and get what you want. So they assume, well, I must work with the wind and the sun and the seas and every other kind of god that they created to try to find a way to control. And so that's what all religions are. The gods of all religions are attempts made in good faith for frightened humans to find a way to control their fear by creating something that they understand and can ultimately control. And that's why today, like one religion has well, there's more than one, has the idea of, making sacrifices and earning your way to heaven, or praying your way to heaven, or doing good deeds and, earning your way to heaven, because you have to earn respect with other humans. You have to earn favor with other humans. And so it's all, just casting the human experience onto eternal life, and it doesn't really fit.
What did you see about the future of religion?
What I saw was that it makes more sense from a source-centered view of life not to have houses of worship and houses of praise. Source doesn't want worship. In fact, one of the 33 souls in my book specifically was told by Source, stop worshiping me. I've seen it, I've heard it, I've had enough of it, just stop it. And it has absolutely no bearing on your afterlife, because, as I said, the universe is created inside Source's mind, which means humans are also created inside Source's mind, and you can't get out. So it doesn't matter, what you do, you're not going to go anywhere but waking up within Source. There's no place else to go. So future that I was shown of religion was more in the way of Source's suggestion of what would be a better way to go. And that was for each individual to adopt their own moral code. Pick some things that you can live with as your moral code. Like your code might be, I will not lie, I will not steal, I will not cheat on my wife, I will not kill, I will not, you make this list of things that you personally feel like you just don't agree with, you don't want to do. And then you live by that code, and take all the money that was spent on building these huge places of worship and huge caches of riches like the Vatican has, and spend it on taking care of the poor and the homeless and the unfed and the discriminated against, and, spread the wealth, because Source doesn't want it.
I think we can all agree that there's a lot of suffering on Earth. Why do we choose to come to a place like this?
Yeah, I get that question most often. It's hard to imagine being Source, and it's hard to imagine being anything other than a human. But as Source, we want to explore everything that we can imagine. And so Source created the universe, and it just expended all this energy, and that it imposed what we would call laws of nature or scientific laws on that energy for how it was going to act. So Source created the law of gravity, molecular cohesion, chemical reactions, biological propagation, like sex, and other ways of propagating species. And it just sent all that energy out there with all these protocols surrounding it, and just watched it evolve, and just sat back and watched it. Source does not interfere in the universe or what happens there. And over a period of time, humans evolved. And I watched the evolution, and I was so angry when I got back that I couldn't remember what humans evolved from. Like each of the steps, I saw them all. And when I was in college, I have a degree in biology, and I had to memorize, all the different species and yada, 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 and charts of primates and stuff. And I thought I would have remembered, the steps of evolution of humans, but I didn't. But so anyway, humans evolved, and they're animals. Most of our religions have this idea that humans are special beings, and they are created in the image of God. They're not. They're just animals. They're just like monkeys and baboons and gorillas. And in fact, they're part of the family of species with monkeys and baboons and apes. And it's human nature, that animal nature, that creates all the suffering. Each human has a soul inside, but the soul's not awake, and it's not aware. The human just runs amok. And even though we may train humans to live in society in the sense that they wear clothes and they eat with utensils and they, don't go around stabbing people every time they get upset with them. Although there's been some training that has gone into society, you can't take human nature out of the animal. Humans will kill. They will prey on the weak. They will be greedy. They will, they just do all these things that are animal nature. And there are only two things you can do about it: training, restraining. You train people not to misbehave, or you restrain them when they do. That's where the prisons come from. But if you go about the idea of human life being something other than animal life, you're going to be disappointed every single time, because the suffering comes from living with wild animals. You can choose not to live with the people who hurt you, and that's about all you can do to protect yourself. But we come here, Jeff, for that purpose. We come here because I was told in the afterlife the Earth is considered a wild and woolly environment. It's a young planet, and it's incredibly diverse in geography and weather and fauna and flora and other creatures. I mean, it's just a wealth of exciting experiences. And so the souls that are the bravest and the strongest and the most courageous and the most daring will at some point in their incarnation stage say, I'm going to go to Earth because I think I can do it. And they may work their way up through, various types of plants and animals and things, and then eventually they'll incarnate into a human. But they're always convinced, I can handle this, and we rarely can. But it's the challenge that attracts us.
What percentage of our consciousness is connected with our eternal being? Because even though we're here as animals, we have to have some amount of self-realization that we are eternal beings and we have these other thoughts.
Well, we're not here as animals. We only inhabit animals. And it is not true that we have to have some level of awareness of our spiritual self. Most people don't. They live an animal life, and that's fine. I mean, that's the whole purpose of coming to Earth and incarnating into an animal, is to find out, what does it feel like to live an animal life? So there's no requirement that we be spiritual or be self-aware or be aware of our true nature as a soul.
Do you think while we're here, we should not be having all this awareness of our spiritual life?
I was specifically told that Source sent 1 million messengers, 1 million souls that have incarnated into human life at this point in Earth's history in order to wake souls up. So I would say, no, it doesn't matter one way or the other, but my own experience is that I have had so much comfort from being aware of who I really am. It's taken so much burden off my shoulders of always wanting to do the right thing and following my path, or knowing what to, it just took all that away from me. So I see a lot of advantages of being spiritually aware, but there's no requirement for it.
Why do you think Source wanted to wake people up?
The Earth is going through a deep transition. I was shown when I watched, the History and Future of Earth, that there are 3 epochs that Earth history is divided into. The first one was, the dinosaurs and, the city of Atlantis type civilizations. And it had a species of humans. We're in the second epoch now, and this is a different species of humans than existed in the first epoch. And we're making the transition now into the third epoch. And depending upon what choices people make now, the third epoch could be a wonderfully peaceful, tranquil life, or it could be a devastation. What I learned in the afterlife is that there is no future. We literally create physical reality moment by moment, individually and collectively. All the souls with an interest in Earth collectively manifest, which is create physical reality. And that's why we all see pretty much the same physical Earth that we see. But our individual lives are literally created by the soul individually and in combination with other souls. And that's what the human lives as a lifetime. Hopefully we can overcome the current trend of animals running the world, using the animal fear and bigotry and greed and selfishness, and and that's what's ruling the world right now. Source sent these messengers to help wake up the souls inside humans so that they can start taking control of the bodies they inhabit, and hopefully train them or restrain them or take control and have them behave better so that Earth doesn't suffer the devastation that I saw in its future. And we can move more toward, a peaceful third epoch. Each soul has to make its own choice, whether to stay here and try to work on behalf of the human race and the planet Earth, or to leave. And what I saw was that the vast majority of souls left and humans died. And we're currently on a trajectory where our leaders and our governments are favoring death. Death by war, death by disease, death by taking away necessary resources. It just seems like nobody cares if anybody lives anymore.
Do you think AI will assist us in this anyway?
I don't know anything about AI. I didn't learn anything about it in the afterlife.
Well, it appears that the most cunning animals on the planet are the ones who have the most power, the most wealth, and other things, kind of like winning a game. Would you agree with that?
I don't know. I don't know. I did want to tell you about one other aspect of the afterlife that is unusual from NDEs.
Mm-hmm.
That was, remember what I said during my life review, my light beings were like popping into my life and living it. While we were moving through Source's energy field toward the core, my 5 light being eternal friends told me that I would have to learn how to merge my energy in order to go to and be included within the rest of us. And so I spent quite a long time merging my energy into like one of my light being friends, and then another, and then little by little I got used to being a merged energy form. And while I was merging with their energy, I could live the physical lifetimes that they had lived. And I could live it as them, or I could live it as me. And see, that's a way to have experiences without incarnating. You get the same type of feelings and sensations and emotions living vicariously. And this is the stage that comes after the incarnation stage. I call it the virtual living stage. But I would, live their lifetimes as them or as me or as both. And it's something obviously you can't do, and it's nothing like anything a human can imagine. But I eventually got to the point where I could merge into all 5 of them at once. And then we went forward, and then I watched the creation of the universe. And then I woke up as Source. And all the 33 souls in my book had this experience of realizing that they were never the human body that they were in, and they were never just one individual soul. They are part of the collective rest of us. They're part of Source. We are all part of Source. We are all God in the sense that we are all personalities or mental characters that it created within its mind. But when you reach the core of Source and you actually wake up as Source, you have not only the sense of the entity or the person that you were before while you were incarnated, but you get all the rest of it. You get the lifetimes and the knowledge of Source. You get the lifetimes of all the rest of us, all the physical living, all the collected wisdom, all the collected experiences. You get it all. You expand outward into all of it. So you don't lose anything when you merge into Source. You gain everything. And that is the ultimate. You were talking about the 5 places that people in NDEs go. One of them being, the void, and one of them being waiting. Well, the actual endpoint of incarnation of life, of everything else, is just wake up to your true nature as Source. And then souls will go in and out of Source as they incarnate and come back. And each time they wake up as Source, and then they go, oh, I think I'll incarnate again. And some of my 33 souls, were very cute about our reasons for incarnating. One woman said, you might want to incarnate into a human just for cake. So we have an eternal life. A human lifetime in comparison is like 2 seconds. And for 2 seconds, we're willing to take all the suffering that comes with being in a wild animal and all the crap that people throw at us to get the cake. For me, it was to get the chocolate.
Do you think we should try to prepare for the afterlife in any way? And if so, how should we?
There isn't any way to prepare. You don't have to earn anything. You don't have to be anybody. There's no path to follow. There's no requirements. There's no expectation. There's nothing. You live in an incarnated form for a while, and then you go back and wake up as Source, and then you do it all over again, or else you move on to the next stage of eternal life. But there's no way to prepare for it. See, that's projecting human thinking onto Source and onto the afterlife. I guess if there were a preparation, it would be to try to feel as much unconditional love as you can, because that's what it's going to be like when you get there.
A few of my guests have mentioned the Crystal City, and you appear to know of it as well. What do you think that place is?
It's not a place, it's a manifestation. When Source created the universe, the term that was used and was explained to me it was manifested. Manifesting is the process of creating what humans experience as physical matter, as solid matter, and as physical life. We souls, being Source, can do exactly the same thing. We can manifest physical matter and physical reality. While we're in the body, we're usually not aware we're doing it. I teach people how to do it consciously and how to undo their bad manifestations created by their unconscious beliefs. But once we get out of body, it's instant. And if when you die and you get out of body, if you expect that the afterlife is going to be a crystal city, you may manifest a crystal city. It's not really there for anyone but you. And the whole purpose of it is to comfort you, to get you over the trauma of passing on from human life. And then in the same way, some people will manifest a library full of what they call the Akashic records. There's no library or Akashic records, but it's a manifestation that comforts people because that's what they expect. And that's why some people will see Jesus or Lord Vishnu or Muhammad or, some religious figure or icon, because that's what they expect. And manifestations are created based upon what we truly and deeply believe. And expectation is the highest form of belief. So anything you expect to happen after you die, you can manifest. It's just for you, and it's temporary, and you'll get past it and it'll be gone. Also, once we're in the afterlife, if it's been a particularly traumatic death, or if the soul's not adjusting very well, other light beings that are there will help manifest things to comfort the soul. And if you came from, earth-like environment, they'll manifest an earth-like environment for you, because that's comforting. But there's no actual physical matter in the afterlife.
What about angels and ghosts? Do those beings exist?
No and yes. The Christian concept of angels being beings superior to humans, like angelic hosts, or choirs of angels, or Saint Michael and Saint Gabriel, and all that. That's all myth. Those literal winged beings do not exist unless you manifest one. So if you go into the afterlife and you expect angels, you'll see light beings. Everybody sees light beings. You may think it's an angel, or you may actually project wings onto it to look like an angel, because that's what you expect. But light beings exist, and light beings are just you and me. It's just what souls look like to newly arrived souls in the afterlife. That physical appearance of being a light being disappears once you get used to it. Ghosts are real, but they're not spirits coming into earth life or coming into the physical world. What they are is, some of us from time to time are aware of the rest of us. Because we exist solely within Source's mind, it is possible for us to become aware of other personalities, other mental characters, other light beings within Source's mind. And then we call it a ghost. Or there can be electrical disturbances in Earth. I told you that near-death experiences, their electricity gets screwed up. They do have an energy change from having been dead. It's possible that you experience somebody's electrical disturbance, but it's because everything exists within Source's mind. There's no God there, universe here. Because everything's all just one big mind, it's possible to experience other parts of that mind from time to time. At least that's what I was told.
What about mediums and channelers? Are those people who have the ability to connect with the rest of us?
I was told specifically in the afterlife, maybe because I'm psychic, that no, mediums and channels do not connect with anyone in the afterlife. What happens is, we souls have total recall. We remember every single moment of everything that we're exposed to during an incarnation. So let's call it human life. So in human life, we may have been exposed to education and other people and movies and books and dreams and fantasies and video games and all kinds of stuff. And the soul remembers every single moment of all of it. But souls do not judge. Humans judge. Souls do not judge. So they do not judge some memories as fiction and some as fact. It's all the same to a soul. So for a soul out of body, instantly have access to total recall of everything they've been experienced to, they can put together all kinds of pieces and parts of things and come up with a believable story. In fact, that's what we do. That's what dreaming is. Dreaming actually happens at the soul level. not the body. The body's out of it. And this was one of those downloads of information I got in the afterlife was about dreams. But anyway, what happens with psychics and mediums and channels and other people who think they're communicating with guides, it is so, so different to be aware of yourself as soul and to be aware of the way you think and remember as soul than what you experience in the body. It's so easy to assume that that information is coming from somewhere else. It's not. It's just information you picked up during your human lifetime.
You use the word soul. Can you define that? And is that the same thing as what people call the higher self?
I don't know what people mean by higher self. When I use the word soul, that's a colloquialism that for me means, Source created these mental characters that I call light beings. And that's because that's what they look like in the afterlife when near-death experiencers see them. A light being puts some of its energy into an incarnation. And I think you asked a question earlier about what percent goes into the incarnation, what percent stays in the afterlife. I don't know. It's immaterial. But the light being puts some of its personality, its energy, itself into an incarnation, and the rest stays in the afterlife. And you maintain that connection. So if you want to know something, ask the part of you that's still in the afterlife. I mean, that's who's going to know. That's who knows what you want, from this incarnation. That's who knows what's the best for you. And in fact, if someone in the afterlife does want to communicate with you, they'll do it directly. They don't go through, a channel or medium or some stranger. And why would they do that? They love you. They want you to have the information in the clearest form possible. And the clearest form is almost never words. It's an understanding. They'll just drop an understanding right into your mind.
The rest of us that's on the other side, whatever that percentage is that knows everything, I guess that's what we would call the higher self, or to me, I like to call it the complete self.
It could be.
And so are you saying that psychics and channelers and, well, maybe mediums and channelers are just communicating with their complete self and getting the information?
No.
Or getting some information?
No, I think it's like I said, being a psychic myself, I think it's a combination of two things. It's mostly just the information that they picked up themselves. It's the information within their soul, not the part of the soul, not the part of the light being that's still in the afterlife. It's just the part that's in the soul, or the part that I call the soul that's in the human being. And then the other thing is you can learn to read other people. You can learn to read their mannerisms, their facial expressions. If you're an empath, you can read their emotions. And so and that's what I do when I have my rare psychic flash, and I'm an empath, is I read the other person, and that's where I'm getting the information. It's not coming from the afterlife or anybody else. It's just me. And that's the same with psychics and mediums. They're just newly aware of information that they picked up somewhere along the course of that lifetime that it's impossible to remember while you're in the body. But once you get out, it's right there.
Do you think that your psychic abilities are a result of your NDEs?
No, I was like that from birth.
What are your abilities?
I can, like I say, I'm an empath, so I feel other people's emotions unless I block them out. And I can read just different things about some people. Sometimes I'm precognitive. I can tell, like, for example, when somebody's going to be hurt. It used to be a terrible burden in my life because I could know that someone was going to have a heart attack, or that they were going to be hit by a car, or they were going to have some tragedy befall them. And I tried very hard to block all that out. Sometimes I know things that, like, for example, I was at a wedding reception for a friend of a friend, but it was somebody I was an acquaintance with. And she and her husband walked in, and I went, and it felt like a freight train hit me in the face. And what I heard was, he's gay and she doesn't know it. that was the freight train of information. So it's just stuff like that. It's just random stuff.
Do you think that stuff is coming through from your soul on the other side?
No,
Because some
I
people,
don't know where it comes from.
some people say we all have psychic abilities.
We do. We just have to tune into it.
Well, your newest book is called 33 Souls Who Met God. What is the biggest takeaway you want the reader to come away with?
The biggest takeaway is that we are God. There's no point in arguing about whose religion is right. There's no point fighting over, religious dogma or religious precepts or religious customs or cultures, because they're all wrong. We are all God ourselves. We are one. So when you're fighting with someone else, you're fighting yourself. When you're arguing with someone else, you're arguing about stuff that exists only in this human life and isn't real in the afterlife. So, if you could somehow get yourself around to believing that you are literally part of God's consciousness and self-awareness, think of how much more you would respect yourself. Think of how much more you would respect and love others, because we're all part of the rest of us. Think about the burden it takes off your shoulders for knowing how to behave, for knowing whether you're on your path or whether you're doing the right thing or whether you're going to go to hell, or, it just takes all that religious dogma burden off of you. And just last weekend with Minneapolis, the shooter shooting into a church full of children praying. Things like that couldn't happen if we would just be aware that we are God, every single one of us.
What feedback from your readers has surprised you the most about your books?
I guess the hateful stuff. I did not expect that.
What is one question that you wished somebody would ask, but nobody has?
If I could think of it, I would write about it. So I would put it in one of my books or in my monthly newsletter. I simply don't know what might be of interest to people that hasn't been asked.
If people want to find out more about your work, what is your website?
NanciDanison.com.
You also have a YouTube channel, right?
Yes.
Are you posting on that regularly?
Well, I answer comments. I just put a new video on there the other day. It was from sometime last year when I spoke to the Virginia Beach Giants group. But I'm not very tech savvy, and it just takes me so long to figure out how to post something on there that I just don't do it. But I do respond to comments.
Before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
I love you. We all love you. All the time, everywhere, no matter what.
That's a great message. Thank you, Nanci, for being my guest.
Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.